Now, last but not least, to conclude this section and this project, I want to migrate all these components to not be standalone components, which would be the more modern and recommended approach, but instead I want to use modules, since this is still a pattern and an approach you'll see in many Angular projects out there. And converting this application to use modules for combining components and pipes and so on instead of standalone components is really easy and straightforward. It all starts here next to the app component, where you should add a app.module.ts file. In that file, you then should create a class, app_module, and decorate that class with the ng_module decorator, which is imported from @Angular core. This decorator then takes a configuration object where you, for example, should add a declarations array where you will declare all the components and other features that need to work together here. For example, here you should add the app component and also add the import here, but also the header component, the user input component, and the investment results component. Now, of course, right now I'm getting a bunch of errors because these are all standalone components and therefore can't be added to ng modules, but I'll change this now. And I'll start with the app component and remove standalone true here. You then also need to remove this imports array, which is what I'll do here. Which also means that you can and should remove all these imports at the top here. Next up, we can continue to the header component and also remove standalone and the imports array here. We can then move on to the user input component and do the same, remove standalone, remove this import, but since I'm importing the forms module here, we'll need to make sure that we add this to our ng module. So back in the app module, which we just added, we should add an imports array here and import that forms module, which is imported from Angular Forms. We must add it here so that these components have access to the features provided by that forms module, like the ng model directive or this ng submit event. Now with that, we can proceed to the investment results component file and also remove standalone true here and also remove the imports array here, though again, here I'm importing the currency pipe, so we must make that available through the app module now. But first, let's remove it here. Let's also remove this import. And in the app module, we now don't add the currency pipe here, but instead the browser module. This module will actually include the currency pipe. The exact position, by the way, doesn't matter, but I'll still add it in front of the forms module, since you'll often see it there, because this is a special module that exposes some features that are often needed, like all those pipes, but also the ngIf and ngFor directives, for example. And in general, you must import this module and make it available when declaring your root module, like we're doing it here. So that is also something that must be imported into this file and then be added to this imports array. With that, we're almost done, but since this is the root module of this application, we also must add the bootstrap property here to this configuration object, and then define all the root components of this application. And in this case, like in most applications, we only have one, which is our app component. But this is an important step. Now, with that done, as a last step, we also need to go to the main.ts file and change this code that starts the application, so to say. Instead of bootstrapping a specific component, we now need to call the platform browser dynamic function, which is imported from @Angular/platform-browser dynamic, and get rid of that bootstrap application import. And that function then returns an object which has a bootstrap module method which you must execute and pass the app module identifier, so the name of that module, which you must import, to bootstrap module. That's how you start an Angular application that uses modules instead of standalone components. And with that, we added this root module which registers all those components. Now, as you learned, you could actually also register multiple modules and split up your application into multiple modules. For example, just to show you again how that would work, we could create a separate module for the user input component, even though here it doesn't make too much sense. But we could add a user input.module.ts file in the user input folder, and then in there export our user input module class, which must be decorated with ng module, of course. And now here we declare just this user input component, because that's the only component we need here for this module and for this component to work. And we add the imports array where we import the forms module. Now back in the app module, you would remove the user input component from declarations and also remove its import here at the top. And since it was the only component that needed the forms module, that would be removed as well. But on the other hand, you would now add this user input module here, so that the things declared by that module, like the user input component, are available to the app component again, for example. That now allows us to get rid of the forms module, and that is how you could split your application across multiple modules and organize your components and their dependencies across multiple modules. Now, if you were to leave it like this, you should be greeted by an error in your terminal though, where you ran npm start, that the app user input component is actually not recognized. Because if you are splitting your application across multiple modules, then the nested modules, so to say, like this user input module here, actually also need to export anything that should be available in modules that import this module. So here we need to export this user input component to make it available to the app module and therefore to all the components that are registered by the app module. With this added here, if you save this, the error should go away and the application should again work in the same way as before, but now using modules. And that's now it for this application. In this section and this demo application which we built here, we used many of these crucial, essential Angular features you learned about earlier in this course. And of course, we'll use all these essentials again and again throughout the rest of this course. So if something's not 100% clear yet, that's no problem at all. You'll get plenty of additional opportunities to practice what you learned throughout the rest of this course. Still, these are some important essentials, and therefore if something's not 100% clear, you also might want to consider revisiting the lectures where those concepts were introduced in the earlier sections, so that you are well prepared to dive deeper into Angular, because that is what we'll do next. We'll dive deeper into Angular, into more advanced concepts, and therefore you'll get more opportunities to practice what you learned. But if something's totally unclear, you should definitely revisit that concept first before you continue.